This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Rob Murat for the first time. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's always fun to talk to musicians. We started doing that back in 2016, and I want to let people know we're also a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that icon up there. It says "Listen on Newsly." And for the audience, if they use the coupon code GHOST, they get 1 month free premium subscription. We'll be on Newsly later today. This is actually episode 990 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast. Been on air
Oh,
since 2016, tracking on Apple Podcast. And we've got your website, www.robmurat.com/FYC. And for those of you who are listening, but that's there, it's not clickable, but it will be fully clickable when we're published. We're on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube right now. And so you'll be
yeah.
able to click through on that. So if you click through on that, is that your link to get to the new album? Good day,
Yeah, that's the link to
good
listen to
people.
the whole album throughout the loops. We're also running a campaign right now, so that's our campaign page. But you can hear the whole project there. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we love to talk to musicians. Like I said, we started doing that back in 2016, and it's always, my honor to talk to creative people. That's why I created the podcast to talk to initially emerging and independent artists that I didn't think were getting paid attention to. And
Right.
again, look, today what we're going to talk about is your album. So I think I got it up there, and it's
Yeah.
like it's an interesting album because you've got John Legend, Jay Ivy, Shatta, Wale, John Connor. You've got some really interesting people that were
Yeah.
able to help you with the project. So I don't know if you want to start, but I want to give a little bit of background. Is you're an award-winning singer, songwriter, producer, and actor from NYC. You've been featured on HBO, PBS, Netflix, MTV, VH1,
Yeah.
ESPN, Fox TV, CBS, and you were also involved in some big things like Fox TV's Bones, and you've been uh, involved in CBS TV's Extant with executive producer Steven Spielberg, opposite Academy Award winning Halle Berry. So that
Yeah.
you've got some really good bones there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's quite a backdrop. Quite a backdrop. Yeah. All true. True story. Yeah.
But I know we want to talk about the album because
Sure.
that's not where we're focused today. But we can bring in all the other things because I think it's all kind of interconnected. I think if you think about music, there's a lot of theater when you're
Yeah.
a musician. Like when you're on
Yeah.
stage, a stagecraft. We can see it with people like Prince, Michael Jackson, Freddie Mercury, all that. Bill Bowie. They're like
Yeah.
having that acting capability. Maybe you can kind of talk about that. But we'll get into the album. So maybe you want
Sure.
to start there.
Yeah, well, as far as the album's concerned, it's entitled Good Day, Good People. I like to say that mountains moved and stars aligned. And man, I put together a village. I didn't think it was possible and just somehow came together. As you mentioned, a good buddy of mine, John Legend, is a collaborator. Jay Ivy, all these are Grammy Award winners. Shatta Wale from all the way from Ghana, who was on Beyonce's Black is King project, and also John Connor. He appears twice on the project. He's a former Dr. Dre protege and an amazing MC. And countless others. So many production collaborations. My production partners, Sean Kantrowitz and Nate Williams, kind of had my back on this one, and we teamed up. And a few other producers are on board as well. And we got a project that we're pretty proud about. And just happy to share it with the world and hear what folks have to say about it. Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting, being able to pull all those great people. Being a
Yeah.
musician is like a lot of times, when you're a musician, it's like it's your team, your creative team, your producers, the other people you work with, your band,
Yeah.
and just in terms of writing the songs, like, have you written a lot of the songs? Have you collaborated with, how much of it is your own work?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to say that I'm a songwriter first, so all of the songs are penned by me. Anything that I'm singing are most likely what I wrote, lyric and melody wise. So I write for myself and others all the time. That's how I came up songwriting and producing, and also doing my own stuff. So yes, I wrote all my work, and the songs are basically penned by me. The features, they write their own stuff. And the one collaboration, main collaboration, was the one, funny story, is the one with John Legend on it. The song's called Believe It. It was originally written for his project, and it came out last year, Legend. and it just didn't make the cut because he had another song that sounded the same. And I was like,
Oh,
man, let me keep this one for myself. And he was like, yeah, I'm down. And funny enough, a little fun fact is that his voice is on the project because he starts writing with ad libs and such, or like doing gibberish tracks. We do the same kind of approach. And I was like, man, some of
uh,
that stuff sounds good in there. Let's just leave it in. So the hook
do
is his
that.
voice singing there. I don't. It's not background. It's additional vocals by John Legend, and he gave me the green light, so it was a blessing. Yeah,
That's awesome because I always talk to people in terms of like when you write a song. I've
yeah,
talked to a lot of probably 300 songwriters on this program,
yeah,
and what I find is sometimes like the happy accident or the initial demo that has like
yeah.
maybe the shadow vocals or original stuff.
Oh
Sometimes
man,
you make decisions and you go back and you might have done like 100 takes, and then you
yeah.
listen to the first three or four,
It's the first
and some
one.
of that stuff that you're gonna get rid of,
Yeah,
you talk to producers and they're like, "No, you don't get rid of that because even if it's not the best mic, maybe it's not fully there, but
right,
it's like it's so authentic
right.
that it's like the core of what the original idea is." And being a
Exactly.
singer-songwriter, that's what I always like to try to get at.
Yeah,
People say, "Well, how do you write songs?" They're like, I feel like, Prince always used to say, they kind of like, "You do what serves the song."
yeah,
So, it
yeah.
serves the song, means I gotta play, you know, something, a different instrument, that's what serves the song, so you're not just
Absolutely,
always in the same space, it's like whatever's gonna work for that particular piece.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah.
So how long did it take for you to come up with this record? Was it something you were working on for a while? Did it come kinda, uh, you know sometimes ideas just come in the middle of the night in a dream, but was this something you were working
Yeah.
on for a while?
Oh, great question. So this one, the best way to answer it is there are certain things on this project that I wrote, like as far as musical elements that I wrote years ago, like over 5 years ago. They were like little tidbits of production tracks, piano tracks, or whatever that I'm using on this project that have been sitting around. Well, the bulk of it
Mm,
has been from pandemic time through earlier this year. So we really dug in. We were locked down for pandemic, just kind of focused. We weren't on stage. It wasn't on set, so I was able to focus on the music and really kind of iron out these songs and think about how I wanted songs to live as a group together and make a full album for the first time in a long time.
that's another question because we live in the Spotify playlist,
Yeah,
world, kinda
yeah,
TikTok,
yeah,
YouTube short world,
yeah,
and I talk to a lot of artists that kinda gotten away from albums, and
yeah,
I've always been I'm a child of the '70s, I grew up with albums, I go to, like,
yeah,
Intervisions, Songs
yep,
in the Key of Life,
yeah,
big things that I want, Pink Floyd, listen to the whole thing, like, I would just
yeah,
get the vinyl, go in the
yep,
basement. And even the Motown records, like, "What's Going On?" Like, when
yeah,
Marvin started to actually start making full albums, they,
right,
like, had themes, even if it wasn't a concept.
yeah,
I've always liked that in music because I think artists tell their story like an author. And
hmm,
even albums, like, I think what started with the Beatles with, like, Sergeant Pepper's and, like, you get into, like, Revolver and Rubber Soul, it's like the idea that you don't just have to be singles. You can
yeah.
have a full concept, and so is that something you've always kind of wanted? Because in this world of playlist and singles, we're kinda told, like, "Well, that doesn't work. You should just focus on singles."
Yeah, well, I was for the last couple of years, I've been in that singles world, just dropping singles here and there, kind of sending them out, getting them placed on TV and film. And for example, I remember talking to a publicist, and I was like, "I'm going to put out an album very soon." She's like, "Why?" It's a singles world. I was like, because I want to tell a full story, and I want these songs to kind of coexist together in one batch and be a musical journey. And that's what we kind of achieved here. And folks have shied away from doing albums, but you got the great albums still coming out. Folks still focused on bringing together an experience, a list of songs. Sometimes there's not as many songs. There are 15 tracks on this project, which is a lot compared to what albums
Well,
are
that's good.
are these
That's
days, where
good.
5, 6, 7 songs is an album. So we really put a lot of work in. We took a lot of time, and to have 15, you had to have 50 to 100 songs to pick from. So it was quite a process. But I really believe in albums. And matter
Yeah.
of fact, the album cover is a kind of a nod to when I was really tiny. And an album was a record. My parents, an album would be a
Yeah.
record,
Vinyl.
and
Right.
that's why I have a record and a record player as our album cover, as a nod to what an album is and was to me as a child.
It's very interesting under in the pandemic. I've talked to a lot of singer-songwriters
Yeah,
that used it as an opportunity to kinda go, go in inner
yeah,
and really focus, and it's interesting when I've talked to them, they've come out with albums because the pandemic allowed people to like, "Oh, I'm not touring, I'm not" people were so
yeah,
busy jumping around,
yeah,
and a lot of
yeah,
musicians, they have to make money touring, or they have to do
yeah,
other side gigs that aren't
yeah,
music, and
yeah,
they weren't focusing on the art of the album. And what I
yeah,
find is like there's a lot of really interesting albums coming out, in the last year because that post pandemic, and to me it's like being a child of the '70s. I always long for that,
yeah.
because that's how I know an artist because the deeper tracks is how I know who an artist is. It's not just a
Ah,
single for me. It's like I like to get deep
yeah,
into an artist and I really know
yeah,
who they are if
yeah,
I listen to the deeper tracks in a project.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, we had a moment. The pandemic gave us a moment just to stop and pause for a second, and as you mentioned, look inward. And in that inward gaze, if I can borrow a term from my friend Blitz, who has his production company named Inward Gaze, we had an inward look at ourselves, and we were able to kind of like take things out and put it on track, write it down. Folks quit their jobs. People had epiphanies and revelations, and they found out more about themselves. And artists, as we do, we create with that inspiration. So that's where I found myself, and I gathered a bunch of folks to join in with me on that effort.
It's interesting also that you said you were looking in your catalog. Like every artist, I think, has their set of their archive of all their tracks. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I like to go back and I'll go back and listen to something and maybe it wasn't working. And
Hmm.
then I like suddenly I said, well, that thing I was doing like 3 years ago, it actually goes with where my head's at now.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then you never know because sometimes it comes in a dream and I'm sitting there or I jump on my Moog and I'm an analog guy and I like to just let my Moog talk to me.
Wow.
And people are like,
Yeah.
"What does that mean?" It's like, well, because it kind of breathes and lives on its own. In this
I
world
hear
of
you.
digital, if you're on like an older instrument, if you're on like an acoustic on a piano, or if
Yeah.
you're on a guitar, or if you're on a bass, those instruments can kind of speak to you what they can do.
Yeah.
And they can kind of come to you and sometimes you might have had an idea and you'll put it out on the bars, but like what the mode gives me sends me in a different direction. It's almost like the muse came to me.
Right.
Do you feel like as an artist that you kind of channel like the universe? Maybe that's kind of weird to say that, but I feel like a lot of artists like we kind of tap into things. And is that how your process is?
Oh
Do you feel
man,
like
that
you
is
do?
not weird. That is the absolute truth. That is the source, right? You can call it God, you can call it the universe, whatever you choose. I attest to that force, that spiritual blessing on everything that I create. Whether I'm collaborating, it's never me. It's always through me. Is how I look at it.
Mm,
So when you sit at a keyboard, you look at it and you're like, well, everybody's got access to these keys, and everyone's going to create something of their own. What am I gonna? What's the synergy here? And I've always allowed myself to just let the creativity happen and not stand in the way. And of course, we're all gifted. We all have talents, and it's just using those talents to allow those things to flow through us. So, not to get too spiritual, but yeah, you brought it up.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I read this thing about Hendrix, and one time Hendrix was a sideman. He was playing with the Isley Brothers, and he
Yeah,
was in the studio, and they were putting down a track, and then he went off and did something, and they said, "What's that?"
yeah,
He said, "Well, the universe gave it to me, and I just couldn't not put it down."
yeah,
So he was this kind of guy that, like, even if he wasn't supposed to do it, he would still kind of go off
yeah,
and say, "Well, the
yeah.
universe gave me this stone, and
Sure.
I gotta put it down," because it's
Get
like
out of
that.
the
It's
way.
kind of
Get
like
out of
he
the
was like
way.
really showing that he was channeling stuff.
Yeah,
And that's why it's his talent that, like, when you really kinda push it, you're on a bleeding
yeah,
edge.
yeah,
Sometimes, like, you're willing to listen,
yeah,
even if you were your part of your brain saying, "Oh, be illogical," and the other part of your brain say, "Well, what's this? This came
yeah.
to me, and now I changed direction." And
Right,
I find a
right.
lot of times, like, I had ideas, and it's what I was kinda just messing around with the sound waves because I do a lot of sound design.
Wow.
And so in a world where everybody's got plugins and everybody's got the same tones, using the same beats. I like to
Yeah.
go on my Moogs and actually create something from scratch from like a sine wave or a square wave. And what I find is it kind of just goes off on its own and gives something to me.
Yeah.
And I'd like what I feel is like that's what happens if you're playing on a bass or a piano, you come up with an original tone. And so many people sample and use AI and do all
Yeah.
kinds of new tools.
Yeah.
And there's nothing
Yep.
against it because there's a
Mhm.
whole, hip hop and DJs and EDM. But there's something about if you're just on a piano or an acoustic instrument or something like a Moog,
Yeah.
and you go on a mic and you just put the tape down. Sometimes, like, I find that I get ideas that I would have never had if I didn't just explore.
It's real. It's real. What you're talking about is real. And how it comes about, we don't know. It's just, and everyone has their own process. So it's not to knock anyone's process. And what you're talking about is what comes organically to you, and magic comes from that.
Yeah, this thing that's interesting also when you collaborate. It's like the whole like if I'm with a guys that are trying to do like a fusion type of thing,
Hmm.
and they kind of like you come to him with an idea and the drummer just goes off and he like you accept. You might have an idea as a songwriter. A lot of times we have ideas. Well, I want it to be this kind of beat, whatever. But
Yeah.
sometimes accepting what the other collaborator brings to the table. When
Yeah.
I've been in bands, is like that's like such a cool process to kind of everybody brings something. So when you're
Yeah.
working with other people, how does that like in the world of COVID and stuff? Was it hard to collaborate? With some of this stuff if you were not able to be in the room.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So, what we started doing was doing remote sessions, and we use a bunch of different platforms. One of them, Pedal, and just kind of get on and have sessions live with each other, and kind of
Mm,
you're playing over there, I'm playing over here, and we're kind of brainstorming together as if we were in the same room, and we could see each other, like in this platform, hear each other. We
mm,
can play and be heard through our DAWs, and it worked perfectly, and it was as
that's
if we were in the same room together. A lot of the project was done in the room, and some of the stuff was pre-pandemic, and a lot of it was remote. Most of it was remote. Yeah.
that's interesting because I've actually gone with that because being a podcaster, that's how I was able to kind of survive during this time period. And I was
Yeah.
doing it before. I started in 2016, and I
Yeah.
found it was a really cool way to talk to musicians. I've talked to musicians all over the world, like Japan and Germany and everywhere.
Yeah.
And just being able to reach out, and I'm in New Hampshire. So like if I just stayed here, I'd only be listening to folk because that's pretty much what New Hampshire is. But but
Yeah.
but like I'm able to go to everywhere.
Yeah.
Then I'm able to talk to all kinds of people that guys that were like really in Berlin doing
Yeah.
really experimental,
Yeah.
synthesis. And then other guys are into like jazz or into country or into rock.
Yeah.
There's so many different things. Do you find today it's like a very cross genre environment where you can mix a lot of the things that are out from hip hop and EDM and jazz
Sure.
and funk and soul?
Yeah.
Or do you have a specific genre you want to focus on?
Well, I'm open. I'm flexible. I go where the music leads. So, for example, we've got 3 artists on the project, all the way from Ghana. Right? I'm not foreign to Ghana. I've worked with Blitz, the ambassador, in the past, and we were coming up, and he's from Ghana, also in New York. But we've got some of the biggest stars out there: Adina Tembi, Shatta Wale, Jupiter, and they all recorded their stuff remotely, sent it over. We were on Zoom and on chats, and we worked through tracks together and just got to get a vibe. Another track on there is co-produced by Richie Mensa, one of the biggest producers out there. And I was working
Mhm.
on a track, but we were having trouble wrapping our head around it. It was a completely different vibe. And I was like, let me reach out to Richie and see what he does with this. I was like, man, I'm thinking about flipping this into a reggae type vibe. I know it's R&B, soul, we're leaning in that direction, but can we give this a reggae tinge? I sent it to him, sent him some of the stems we had, and he flipped that thing, and it's Is She You on the project. Initially it was a six
Oh,
eight
wow.
ballad. Now it's a hard-hitting reggae vibe, and it's one of my favorite tracks on the album.
That's really cool how things can
Yeah.
transform,
Yeah.
because sometimes you get a demo and, as you were writing it and it was a 4/4 or it was like 6/8 or whatever, and then
Yeah.
suddenly you give it to somebody else and they're like, "No, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do like put it into a funk. I'm gonna put it into a
Yeah.
James Brown funk, or I'm
Yeah.
gonna do something like Sun Ra." and I'm gonna
And the
do like
trick
things
is,
into
and the
place.
trick is to allow it to happen. You
Yeah,
can't, you got to allow the music to go where it needs to go organically, right? If I was to be like, no, this one's got to have a 6/8 feel, then it wouldn't be what it is today. So you've got to be open, as to your point before, is to let it go where it wants to go without putting genre, um, chains on it. And oh no, it's got to be this way or sound this certain way. I can't create that way, and I don't.
yeah, because there's a lot of tools now. I mean, I've talked to some people and they're like, "Well, AI is gonna replace musicians," and I'm like, I really don't believe so because I
Mhm.
really think the heart of music, going back to Lead Belly, is like it's that human experience. It's like that going to the crossroads and those early blues guys. That's always gonna be a human story. That's
Yeah,
always gonna be something that a human being has to relate. Not that the AI can't do it. I'm
yeah,
not saying it can't do it. I just
yeah,
don't think that it'll do it as well as a human being.
yeah. AI will do a good job and will continue to do a good job at imitating humans, but they will never replace humans. They're two different things. You can imitate a human, but you can't replace the human being. And that's where we'll always have the upper hand. We're turning into the creators, into the prompters now with Chat GPT and all that. So as opposed to you sitting down and writing that essay or writing that song, you're like, hey, Chat GPT, write me a song about blah, 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 blah. It'll formulate something for you, and it'll imitate what it knows from the sphere, but it'll never replace the human touch, right? So that's what we have working for us, and we're just going to have to
Yeah,
learn how to
but I think what
coexist.
it people some people I think it seems yeah, but it seems like a producer game too. Like if you're a producer or a recording engineer, you can do things like, "Oh, I can take this artist's voice and then put it in onto a project that it never was on."
Yeah,
And then I'm like, "Well, does that artist even agree with you doing that?" And I
right.
still think there's like in terms like it's like to me, it gets back to like the sampling kind of thing. Like when the first hip hop guys did samples, they say,
Yeah,
"Well, that's free." And then they
right.
said, "No, no, people own that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
so so I think at some point, artists are gonna say, like, "I don't know if I agree with what you wanna do with my personal work."
sure.
Like, and my
Yeah,
voice
and
might be
the
mine
system will and
mine.
the system will adjust, and we will put things in place in order to control those things. So sampling, you have to go through a process by which the original gets profit credited and all the systems in place to protect the originator of the work. And I think that's the same thing with your likeness or your
Yeah.
voice, and we'll find ways to do it for
I
sure.
think that's important. Like, I think sometimes technology lets you do something, but there's like, then the other things have to catch up. And so
Yeah,
just because you can do it doesn't mean that you're always gonna be able to do that. It's like
yeah,
sometimes it jumps ahead of the constraints of what's allowable.
yeah, yeah,
But I think like anything, like, there are people like I'm an electronic musician. There are people that said back in the 50s, you can't use a Moog. That's not real music. And now and then now we know like Sun Ra and P
yeah,
Funk and
yeah,
Curtis May, all these great funk
sure,
artists and Prince, they
yeah,
all use synths. And
yeah,
they show that you can be a very expressive.
yeah,
So the tech always comes to a point, and then purists will come and say, like when Dylan went electric, the folk purist said, "Oh, he's a Judas, he's not good." Like anytime somebody pushes it, when
yeah,
Miles went to fusion,
yeah,
people said, "Oh, that's bebop is really
yeah,
jazz."
yeah,
So it's like there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like where you're going, but you go there because that's what you feel, right?
yeah. I live by many mottos. One of them is some will, some won't, so what? That's it. Some people will dig what you're doing, others won't. That's none of your business. Do what you do and do it the best you possibly can. That's it. Period. No further question. And that's how it's going. You're going to find your tribe. You're going to find your supporters. You're going to find your fans. And you're going to uplift those who are going to be uplifted by your music. And others don't matter. I heard someone say one time, and this is when I really locked into that quote of some will, some won't, so what. So, I don't know who it was, but they said they didn't like Stevie Wonder's voice. And I was like,
It's like that's not
right. So it's like at that point you're like, okay, wait, okay, okay, I get it now. Some things aren't for everyone, and because that person is obviously insane. but in
Yeah.
their
How
taste
could you
buds,
do that?
their taste buds are their taste buds. So it's like
Yeah, that's what
it's
it
not for
is.
everyone. And I had
Yeah.
to come to terms with that fact. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because like, you think about a guy like Stevie,
Yeah.
and you know, that kind of with where you are with your album, like, with
Yeah.
like, he's like the super creator of the album form within, like, soul music, in
Genius.
terms of
Yeah, he's a genius. Yeah,
being
yeah.
able to take it. Yeah, and he had jazz and rock and
Love
funk,
it.
and it was
Yeah.
all combined before
Yeah.
Prince,
Yeah.
that he was he's the standard bearer that Prince was looking at. They're
Yes.
like, "This is what you can do,
Yeah.
that you can actually be that expansive," and that's why I kinda, like, in my record label for my own work, I call it Expansive Sound. They kinda got it from Intervisions and The
Yeah.
Secret Life of Plants, and Songs in the Key of Life, because I grew up with my father playing that stuff along with a
Big
lot of
time
jazz
influence.
and
Yeah.
and Nat King Cole and all this great, Brubeck, and I was just listening to all this great music, and my brother was playing, like, Zeppelin and Hendrix, and I was just
Yeah.
getting everything.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like, well, yes, I like the rock, I like the jazz, I like Johnny Cash, I like everything.
Hmm.
It's like I like so many different styles. It's like, why can't you kind of merge them? And what
Yeah.
I loved what Wonder was doing, and what Prince did was, like, the
Yeah.
idea that you can meld. He's taking Kraftwerk. Prince
Yeah.
took, like, this German brand Kraftwerk
Yeah.
and took funk, and then Hendrixian and Santana style, and kinda created the Minneapolis sound. You can
Yeah.
see the roots of it, but it
Yeah.
comes from all these different things, and it's not that you're cloning it, you're making
Yeah.
it your own.
Yeah. I mean, what you're explaining here uh, is distinctly where I'm living musically, especially on this project. Matter of fact, that the album got submitted into a category for the Recording Academy for the Grammys in progressive R&B album. And that space, that category allows the R&B to live in different spaces with the hip hop influences, with the synth influences, with the Caribbean and Afro-Cuban and Afro beats, all these
Yeah,
influences, and it kind of sits seamlessly into something that is, right? So it's not like you're jumping around. It's a journey
yeah.
that makes sense, and it's tightly wrapped around R&B with different influences seamlessly fit in. So that's why we're so proud of the project. And what you're talking about, Stevie does amazingly, and a bunch of artists do amazingly.
Well, that's the album. That's
Yeah,
why you want an album, because a
exactly.
lot of times I always tell people, like, if in the modern context of a playlist, that you get 2 minutes and 30 seconds to get that audience into it, and then they
Yeah,
might not ever come back to you, right?
right,
And then they think you are that 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and
right,
they never really delved into
right,
what we're talking about. Is the album
right.
allows you to actually be a sonic storyteller, that I talk about,
Well
sound
said.
paintings.
Well said. Well
Sound
said.
paintings to Yeah, the idea, like, sound painting kinda comes back to the Beatles, and, their producer, George Martin, had
Hmm.
this quote, in a documentary, and he said, "Well, I could have kept the lads playing like they were in Hamburg, and this being this kinda, tax man type of band, just
Yeah.
doing kind of rock."
Yep.
But,
Yep.
he had been working on Peter Sellers' comedy records, and
Oh
on the
wow.
Peter Sellers comedy records, there were backward tape loops, there were orchestras, there was overdubs, there were special effects, and
Wow.
then he found out that the Beatles knew about those records, and they said, "Can we employ some of those things you're doing on the Peter Sellers comedy records on a rock album?" And that's
Wow.
when they started to get into the idea that the studio could be an instrument, that you could go, and he talked about it being like Monet, and then he brought up
Yeah.
the term of
Yeah.
sound painting, that you
It's
could
art.
do
It's
something.
art. Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
studio, you can't do live, that you could
No
actually
different than
layer things.
Picasso. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's where we are today with our
Yeah.
DAWs, and
Yeah.
even before that with the multi-tracks, being able to
Yeah.
multi-track, and that's how you can, be so expressive with an album. And then maybe
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about, like, your techniques when you're, like, layering, like, with, like, shadow vocals, or
Yeah.
enhanced, overdubbing and
Yeah.
doubling your voice or multiplying your voice in different.
Yeah.
How deep do you go into, like, sound architecture of for your records?
Great question. It all depends on what the song and the track calls for. Sometimes you'll have a simple piano vocal thing where you don't need to do too much. And there are certain songs that require more production, more layers, because you're kind of setting up an ecosystem of sound. And both those type of songs and elements live on this project. And it's just about where you're willing to go with it. The song, I don't know what it is. It's an organic feeling. It pulls you, right?
Mm. Hmm.
It tells you when to go and it tells you when to stop. And all you
Yeah.
have to do is listen. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
this song needs a little more, let's keep going. Up, stop right there. Up, you went too far. Let's pull back. Let's delete that track. You didn't need that guitar track. Come on now. You're doing too much, right? So I think the
Yeah.
song kind of speaks to you to kind of find the right zone. And if you overdo it, you can hear it. If you underdo it, it can be heard. There's something missing, right? And that's kind of the art, again,
That's the art of
of
it.
creating a song and an album. You know what I mean? So, and that's the fun part and the challenging part that keeps you up, pulling all nighters. And there have been times where I just couldn't sleep. I was just staying up all night, listening and listening and listening. I'm like,
Trying to get it.
got it. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
But trying to serve the song, because I remember,
yeah,
like, I've always go back to Prince, but, like, on his first record, they wanted him to get produced, um, by Earth, Wind& and Fire, Maurice
yeah.
White, and he said
Okay.
no. He knew what he wanted. He was
Yeah,
17, and he knew
yeah,
what he wanted, and he did. He
yeah.
could if he had been produced by Maurice White, he would have sounded like Earth, Wind& and Fire, and
Absolutely.
what the thing that he wanted is he wanted to sound like himself.
Yeah,
Which was interesting, 'cause
yeah.
they to kinda push the sound the way you wanna sound, sometimes
Sure.
it's hard, because,
Yeah,
like, there's a lot of people, and if you're 17, a lot of people probably would've gone with Maurice White 'cause, well, he
right,
knows better than me,
right.
but it's kinda like, you gotta kinda know where you are as an artist, and, like, what serves the song.
Yeah,
Like, if you have a song, like A Dove's Cry, there's a version of it with the bass line. I'm a Prince head,
yeah,
and then what he realized is the bass line wasn't really doing it,
yeah,
and he pulled it out, and I've heard the
yeah.
one with the bass line. And
Sure.
you can hear that's like, yeah, it's too much.
Yeah,
And when you pull it out, it really makes it. So some
yeah.
songs you get the wall of sound, you get like, this kind of wall of sound thing. Like, if you get into like Born to Run,
Sure.
and it's got that Phil Spector, wall of sound.
Nice.
It
Yeah,
need it. That song needs it. But there
yeah.
are other songs like, Bruce has done like in Nebraska. There are just 4-track Tascam with a little bit of overdub. It's like very raw,
That's all
and
you need.
that works
That's
too.
all
There's
you
some
need. Yeah,
It is sometimes a song doesn't need it, or sometimes it
yeah,
does need it, and you kinda
yeah.
like each one is its own baby, like you birth it and that's it. That's
Sure.
what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. The song itself is a collaborator, and it's weird to say that, but the song itself is a collaborator. You got co-producers, you got co-writers, but the song itself, the thing that's being created, speaks back to you. So the conversation, spiritually, creatively, however you want to call it, it's a joint effort between the creators and what is being created, and that thing tells you when it's cooked, right? Just like you have something in the oven, you got to poke
Yeah,
it to see if the knife comes out
is it
clean. You're
done?
like, okay, I'm
Is it
done. I'm done. Take it out of the oven, right? Well, so the cook doesn't know, or the chef doesn't know until that thing tells you, hey, you could time it, right? You could put 15 minutes, but it could be 15 minutes and 30 seconds or 14 minutes. So it's an ongoing conversation with what's being created, creator and created.
that goes to, like, when you take a song,
Hmm.
right, and then you put it on a record, but then you perform it.
Yeah,
What I kinda love back in the '70s and even in the
mm,
past, in the '90s,
yeah, yeah,
is like somebody goes out and they do the live version of the song. It's not necessarily note for note what it was on the record.
right. Nor
It
should it be.
becomes like
Yeah,
the live version becomes its own thing, because, like, there's things like the fact that you can do something live, you can do things that you didn't do. There's some things you can't do. But maybe
right.
today, the problem I think is people are like, well, I can actually run this with all the backing tracks and make it sound exactly like the record.
Why did I pay a
And I
ticket?
think
Why did I come out? Why did I leave my
why would
house? Why did I leave my house to
to do
come
that?
sit in this theater to come watch you press play?
Yeah,
It's that's
yeah,
not what we come
that's
to,
it.
to see in the live show. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the wonder.
yeah.
When I see bands that do that, I'm like, I'm used to seeing like Funkadelic.
Okay.
And we go to
Yeah.
see Funkadelic in the day, it's like, they were never playing that the same way.
Take it
That
somewhere
was
else.
always gonna get done somewhere.
Yeah.
It was never. I mean, I saw the Almonds. The Allman Brothers, they had those songs, but they're a
Yeah.
jam
Yeah.
band, and when
Yeah.
they went out, it was a different interpretation every night. And so, and even a band like Pearl Jam are known
Mhm.
for their fans for seeing them 3 days in a row because Eddie
Yeah,
changes the lyrics. Like Eddie
yeah.
Vedder, and this is something Dylan used to do in the 70s. He had like
Oh,
multiple
wow.
versions of like Tangled Up in Blue. And when he
Wow.
would do it live, he would change the story. He would actually change the lyrics. And if you go listen to some of the live versions of Dylan
Yeah,
playing Idiot
I
When or
will. I
Tangled Up
will
in
have to
Blue,
go look it up.
he
Yeah,
actually would change the story in actually
yeah.
different versions of it. And I
I'm
always
sure.
thought that's pretty cool
I'm
that
sure.
you could do that.
Yeah, that's the flexibility you have for the live performance. Live is live. The album is album, right? The album is kind of the launching pad for the live experience, right? If I'm going to leave my house, as I mentioned before, I'm going to expect an experience, a live experience, different from what I felt from the project. And it should be amplified. It should be elevated when I come see you live. I
Yeah,
should be
because
like,
you kind of,
wow, again.
as a musician, right, you feed off the crowd.
Yeah.
And if you're in the
As an
box,
actor
how
as
are you gonna
well. Yeah.
yeah, how are you gonna yeah, I was an actor
Yeah.
back then because like being an actor, like if you're in front of a live audience,
It's a whole
like
different
you
thing than being on set. Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna
Yeah.
feed off of that and your character, that your character you're playing, but you're
Yeah.
gonna
It's
feed off
energy.
that moment
It's an
and you
energy.
can kind of what the person's gonna say. So you become that person, you can
Yeah.
actually speak to it and you could adjust even if it's not in the script. You could make you become that character so that I
Right.
think that's what happens when you're a musician. You're like a Freddie Mercury on stage. He
Right.
became
Yeah.
that guy, you
Yeah.
know. And it's like you see Michael Jackson, he became that guy. He's like,
Right.
well, he doesn't act like that outside of the stage because that's
Yeah.
on the stage he's like a different space. How
Of
do you
course.
feel like that?
Absolutely. I think the script is the script, right? You're not going to change the words. The song is the song. The script is the script, right? But above that and below that and around that is how it's portrayed, how it's delivered. That's what changes from the recording or from the page or from being on in four walls on the set and then being on stage. It's the energy and how you deliver it and what's behind it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That totally makes sense because like what how you're feeling, and
yeah,
how you interpret that moment. And
yeah.
it's like this idea of living in the present. Because I
Right.
think I heard Herbie Hancock had this example of playing with Miles. He said
Hmm.
he actually hit the wrong chord playing with
Yeah,
Miles.
yeah,
And then he was really upset. He thought he was going to get slammed.
yeah.
And then Miles actually adjusted to what he played.
I heard that
And then
story.
he said, well, there's no wrong note, and you
You
also got
know,
to
I
live
know.
in the
Yeah,
present. And
yeah.
you live in the present, and you don't like throw it out that you actually advance. And so, if you
Yeah,
were able to live in, I think Victor Wooten talked about the same thing. He's had this master class showing on his bass that he could hit the same feeling in multiple scales in
wow,
multiple keys, showing
wow.
that he could hit the same feeling, and it didn't matter. And he's like, I can still get this funk groove, and he was jumping all over multiple variations and showing that it's like, see, I can still do it.
Isn't that
So that
exciting?
means like, yeah, it was
Isn't
just
that
that
isn't
feel.
that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think some people get so locked in that I understand, like, because people want perfection. And I guess
Mhm.
why I kind of, one of the things I like to ask people about today, there's a lot of feeling of like, I can make it perfect, but I'm kind of on the time of the happy accident in the studio where people allowed themselves, maybe to go with the third or fourth take with the problems with it. Like there might have been
Mhm.
some issues, but it actually feels more authentic. It feels better. And maybe I could do it better or I
Yeah,
could be technically more perfect, but it's the
yeah.
feeling on the fourth take or the third take or the fifth, that feeling I haven't been able to recreate. And I
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
sound. And even if it's imperfect, it's actually perfect for that moment.
Well, you just said it. You just said it. What is it's it when you say perfect, that's a tricky word when it comes to creativity. Perfection is honesty, right? Authenticity. And if I do it 22 times and I make it sound with flawless, I would say that that's less perfect because you want to lean into something real, something that's honest and authentic that people can grab onto. right? You're
Hmm.
sucking emotion from it. You're sucking by trying to make it, like auto tune it down to the tune.
Clean.
You trying to get it down to the exact. You kind of, and I had to get over that myself. It's like I want it to be perfect. I want it to be perfect until I redefined what perfect was, and perfect is what people
Hmm.
can hear and associate and relate to. And there's an authenticity and honesty in the work, and of course, you want it to sound great. And the goal is to make it authentic and great sounding as best as you possibly can. And that's as close to perfect as you're going to get.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
like I always like funk and the fusion and experimental
I can
music
tell. Yeah, you're a funk guy.
because I
Yeah,
like. Well, I just like if you listen to these James Brown jams
yeah,
on chess records with
yeah.
his bands,
Sure,
and I'm like
sure.
just the fact that he's out there just doing it like he used to
Yeah,
say he's doing it,
for sure.
and there's something that was really authentic about that ability to just be in that groove and let it be.
Hmm.
And it seems like, with some of the machines today, yeah, I really love real like live drummers.
Okay.
And I think people have kind of forgotten about how good the Stax and Motown drummers were, right? And the Percy Shuffle and all those great capabilities, and they're kind of
Yeah,
locked into like 909s, 808s,
yeah,
limbs,
yeah, yeah,
all that. And I use them
yeah,
because I'm a single guy, so I have to, I'm using a lot of drum machines. But when I
yeah,
work
yeah,
with a real percussionist,
yeah,
there's something about that that's just fantastic.
yeah. It's unhinged. It's not locked in. It's not digital. It's something else. It's live. It's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you created the album, what made you call it "Good Day, Good People"? What's the
Okay.
story? What's the
Great
story for that?
question. Great question. So that's been one of my sayings for maybe over 10 years now. I've always, if you look back on my social posts, and if anybody knows me, they know that good day, good people is one of the things I say all the time. It's kind of like my tagline, good day, good people. And in creating this project, I I also wanted to kind of attach to or let the theme of long live feel good music kind of guide the way. So I wanted to kind of establish a feel good vibe on the project, even if we go places that may be dark at times.
Mhm.
As the back end of that is is feeling better. So we wanted to kind of establish a reassuring feeling. Like the world has been through a lot of late.
Mhm.
We're continuing to go through a lot of things, and sometimes we forget that it's okay to feel good, or we forget that we have that capacity to feel good and be productive and be to live. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, good day, good people is kind of like a reminder that it's okay to feel good, to live good, be good. You know what I mean? And it sounds corny, but that's the crux. That's the foundation of the project. Good day, good people. Good day, good people.
Well, I think that's inspiring because we've been through a lot of dark times,
Yeah, we have.
and it is always, affirmation when I listen to like Bob Marley
Yeah,
or listen to Stevie Wonder, you feel this like elevation,
yeah,
especially in Stevie and Bob's work is like this idea that there's like I'm going to a higher level. I'm
yeah,
pushing for even when I might be talking about something serious.
yeah,
It's still an infectious beat. It's an
mhm,
infectious feeling. It feels
yeah,
very life affirming.
yeah,
So I get it. Like you can still be serious,
yeah,
but you can be uplifting,
yeah.
affirmative, and positive.
And and I've always relied on music and other art forms for that, right? So why not give that to the world? If I'm a creator, give what I get from music, right? Give that opportunity to be uplifted or to just have a good time or to, chill with your honey on the couch, as opposed to Netflix and chill, music and chill, whatever it is. And if I'm feeling down, it's okay for me to rely on some of these songs to just kind of pick me up. You know what I mean? And all that is
Mhm.
in the spirit of feeling good. And feeling good is not this corny approach to like, oh, just happy music. No, it's about finding a way through certain things in life to still feel good and be productive and remember who we are so that we can operate in that the highest elevation of ourselves. You hear Oprah talking about it, a bunch of people talking about it. And that's kind of one of the foundations of the album as well.
Well, I think music in itself is very cathartic, at least for the
Yeah.
songwriter. Like if
Hmm.
you're a songwriter and a singer, like, and you're in the middle of that process, when you get into sweet spot of that flow state.
Yeah.
You feel like this, I've actually created something from inside and from
Hmm.
outside and brought it to the world and put it out
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
that in itself, that moment of creation just feels so, that's why I do music.
It's
Whether
rewarding. Yeah, it's rewarding.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just in
Hmm.
itself, it's just that immediate feel that you get,
Yeah.
from taking from inside and putting it out.
Yeah.
I
And
just
that's the
find that,
validation. See, that's the
yes,
validation. Everything else, like the reviews and even votes and all that's icing on the cake. The validation is the reward of offering it to the world and allowing someone to feel what you felt while you were creating it. That's the true validation. Everything else is extra.
well, today there's so many things for musicians. Like, I know we, as an actor, there's been a strike, and it's
Hmm.
always been about like your rights and
Hmm.
and how you get paid
Yeah.
and how people get valued. And I think
Yeah.
what I found is like, when I'm a child of the '70s and then Napster came,
Hmm.
right? And then it was like,
Yeah.
then it started to like devalue music. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's free. And
Yeah.
then like, well, there are people that created this and put their heart and soul in it,
Yeah.
and then they're not being compensated.
Right.
And then we see actors and screenplay writers and all kinds of people are not getting compensated.
Yeah.
And it's not all about money, but it's like about respect. Like if you
Yeah.
respect art,
Yeah.
artists shouldn't be starving
Right.
for their work,
Yeah.
and certain people shouldn't be getting the lion's share
Right.
of what you put into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we're on strike, right? In order to devalue, you got to up someone else's value, right? Because value is almost like energy; it's not lost, right? And we're finding more creative ways to earn, to profit from everything that we're doing, whether it's music or from TV shows or film or whatever, even these things online. We're finding ways to capitalize on it, and yet the creators are making less, while someone else is getting more. And all we're saying is that the creators should share in the uptick of the value that's being created. And it's a right argument, and we're working our way through it.
I believe that is a really crucial thing because a lot of artists, right? From when I talk to a lot of musicians, the only way they, the entry level emerging independent artists, they have to tour like crazy
Yeah.
when they first get out there because they
Hmm.
don't make any money from their music
Hmm.
in the industry as it is now.
Yeah.
Unless they sell their mixtape or they do vinyl and they sign
Hmm.
it or whatever,
Yeah.
you make more money selling a T-shirt or
Yeah.
a poster
Hmm.
at a merch table
Yeah.
than their actual heart and soul. What they do is singing the song,
Yeah.
and it's like, how did it get that the song doesn't have the value of the T-shirt?
But it does. But it does, because if you wrap your head around that, right, it's the song that sold the T-shirt.
Yeah, that's true. That's the way I look at
So
it.
it's the song that helps you sell the merch. So if you're able to think about it critically, the song can be the foundation of everything else. All of your other entrepreneurial ventures, right? You know about Snoop Dogg because of he's a hip hop legend, but he sells everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
He sells
yeah.
everything,
Pitch man.
right?
But
Yeah.
that's how you
So
do it.
yeah,
You gotta get into the licensing, sync licensing, and then
that's what we're
licensing your
focusing on.
image.
Yeah,
And
that's what
that's
we're
where you're like,
focusing on.
yeah, and that's where like his image, so this is where the kind of AI argument comes in. Well, you don't want somebody taking Snoop Dogg's image and
Hmm.
then using that without his approval
Right.
to do what he's doing as a pitchman.
And
Because
they
it's
won't.
totally, yeah,
And
because
they won't.
yeah,
That's easy to fix. They won't.
yeah,
Right. All you need is Snoop Dogg to be like, "Hey, that wasn't me."
yep, and that's it. That's where we have to all kind of
Right.
go for
Right.
because
And once laws are in place,
yeah,
you one or two missteps, and then you a couple of court trials, and everything will fix itself.
yeah, because
Yeah.
that's where I think the future is. Everybody understands that. I
Yeah.
was talking to some software developers, and they were like, "Well, I don't know if the songwriters really own their music." I said, "Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And if you're a software developer and you don't think so, then you're gonna find out.
You're gonna find out. Go around and find out. For those people who've seen the meme there or that clip, they'll understand. Yeah.
So what's next for you? Because I know because is the strike still you haven't been able to do any acting, right, because of the
Right. So
strike?
we're still on strike, and we're looking for a resolution as soon as possible. The writers were able to secure a deal, and we're looking forward to securing our deal in the very near future. In the meantime, myself will be on standby and pushing this project. And we're in the midst of a Grammy campaign right now, and we're reaching out to Recording Academy voters and really pushing it and getting the songs heard and the album positioned as best as possible. And you mentioned licensing; that's going to be our next stop. That's our primary stop, is to get these songs on TV and film. We call it soundtrack music.
Yeah,
And above all,
that's
we're
great.
looking to get these songs on TV and film as many places as possible. So on your next TV show or down the line, next year maybe, you'll hear a lot of the songs on this project on the soundtracks of some of these your favorite movies and TV shows.
Are you gonna tour at all, or are you gonna focus more on getting into film and other projects?
So yeah, we'll do spot dates, but primarily we're looking to get licensing and that down the pipe. But we will be performing. We'll be hitting the stage. I have some performances lined up already, and stay tuned for more information on that.
Uh, That's awesome. So if people go to your website, they'll find that
Yes, they will.
when you're ready to do
It'll
that.
be, yeah,
That'll
it'll
be
be all over social. And our live experience is no joke. You mentioned the album being one thing, and then the live experience being something else. We don't hold back when we hit the stage. I mean, we roll up there with horns and strings and
yeah. That's
just
what I
make it a
like.
whole thing. You just make it
Yeah,
a whole thing.
that's very Motown Stacks days.
Yeah,
That's what I was. I grew up watching those bands. And
yeah,
watching the guys playing behind the temps.
yeah,
We're watching, Curtis Mayfield and
yeah,
his band, and
yeah.
and even the impressions before that. But it's like that's what it's about for me is like
Mhm.
that experience of seeing a group like that, out there. Like Curtis Mayfield back in the day, the Superfly days. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like just to feel that power of
Yeah,
the congas and the power.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
that experience is like, I don't know, some of the young people don't understand like that kind of live music. And
yeah,
I always appreciate when people like yourself bring that live music to people.
yeah,
Because I think some of the young people today need to see that. And I
yeah,
understand that the EDM and the hip hop sometimes doesn't have that. But
yeah.
more than not nowadays, there's a lot of hip hop artists that actually are integrating
Oh
band
yeah, oh
into
yeah,
their background because
oh
they've
yeah, for sure.
realized what the fact is, it feels better if
Yeah.
you come out there and you have a band behind you.
For sure, for sure, and it takes nothing away from the power that exists. Where if I were just to show up and have the keys and just sing a song, that's powerful as well
Well, that's
too.
powerful too, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
That's
It's
like
not a
unplugged.
judgment, right? Live is live, and however it's presented, there's value in each, right? It's just that the music calls sometimes for your horns and your live setting, as opposed to sometimes scale back and strip down, and then like a really cool voice and piano or voice and guitar that can be just as moving, if not more.
Well, yeah,
You
like
know?
the unplugged kind of situation of coming
Yeah.
out there with an acoustic guitar or just a
Yep.
regular acoustic
Yep.
piano. I
Yep.
am very much into that. Being in the
Yeah.
New Hampshire scene, we get a lot of folk, a
Yeah.
lot of people on pianos, not a lot of other instruments, but
Yeah.
that feel is so authentic.
Yeah.
I really like the honesty
Yeah.
of sometimes not having all that. Then if you can come out there and do that unplugged kind of
Yeah.
performance or scaled back, it's very emotional and it really gets to the heart of your song. You
And it
kind of like,
ties back to what I was talking about with creating songs for the album, right? Some
yeah,
songs call for all that production, and some songs call you to pull back and
pull
just
back,
have
yeah.
a piano track and your voice and some background harmonies. So it's all about the vibe and it's about the setting and what the actual thing calls for. Some live settings call for you coming in with a marching band and everybody on their feet, right?
Like a New
Other
Orleans band.
settings call for just, hey, listen, just grab a glass of wine and let's just vibe through this moment together. Me, you, and a piano. You know what I mean? So I'm in for all of it.
Yeah, this thing it's awesome to talk to you today. It brings me back to the beginning of the podcast back in 2016,
Yeah.
where primarily we focused on musicians. Lately, we've been talking to like everybody,
Yeah,
which
sure.
kind of think everybody can be a creator. And so
Yeah.
I kind of opened it up, but like you have multiple hats. You're an actor, you're a
Yeah.
musician. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like the way the world is today with podcast is like we've become more expansive in terms of our reach. And I think that's kind of the goal for a lot of people. Like you wear a lot of hats, you try a lot of things
And
just because
congratulations. Congratulations, by the way. That's a lot of 990. That's a lot. Congrats, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
we're trying.
Yeah,
Well,
man. No,
we
you're not
really,
trying. You're doing. You don't try at 990. I think the trying is done. You're doing it now. You're doing it now.
but thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to let people know again, www.robmurat.com. That's fully clickable. When we're
Yeah.
published, we're on all the platforms that podcasts can be listened to or heard. We're going to provide a landing page for you guys
Thank you.
later today. So make it easier for people to pick up how we do that. And again, we were on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch live. You'll be able to see that immediately because we're on there right now. You'll be able to see those links and you'll click on that. If you go to Facebook after this, you can go right to that. But thank you again for
Wonderful.
being on the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
You have a good day.